Alright, so the final episode of Tulsa King has come out, and the plot for it is pretty much this. It's all hands on deck as tensions between Dwight's crew and Waltrip's escalate past the point of no return. Alright, let's get into some of the things that happened in this episode, and the first one is that we had a really good cold open, and for the past 8 episodes we've been hearing about Dwight being sent to prison for 25 years and how he killed a guy, but we never actually saw the scene of him killing the guy. But in this episode we actually end up seeing that, and the way that Dwight kills him is not in the way that you would expect. It was actually Charles who was torturing the guy at first, and Armand was trying to get Charles to not torture him anymore, but obviously Charles wasn't going to listen to him, so Armand ends up actually calling Dwight to try and defuse the situation. But then a huge fire goes off and then everyone runs away, but Dwight ends up staying and ends up shooting the guy because the guy was literally in a certain position where the thing that was holding him was way too strong for any of them to lift it out, so he was either going to burn to death or get shot in the head. Another thing that happens in this episode is, obviously last episode I said that Dwight was going to be in prison, or not prison, but just behind bars, and he actually didn't end up getting behind bars, at least not in that certain point of the episode, but he ends up getting, called into question and nothing happens. Dwight's not going to say anything that will get him incriminated, and he ends up getting out really quickly and much quicker than I thought he was going to. Another thing that happens in this episode is that Waltrip and his guys are, obviously running away from the police, and they're in this isolated area, and one of Waltrip's guys ends up questioning Waltrip himself, and obviously Waltrip did not like that because he ended up shooting him straight in the head, and I thought the scene kind of looked a bit fake. But once again, it's not like I'm actually expecting them to film a guy getting shot in the head, but it did kind of look a bit questionable in my opinion. Another thing that happens in this episode is Armand and Dwight have a really great scene together, and it's honestly one of my favorite scenes of the show so far, and it's pretty much just Armand explaining to Dwight that pretty much his whole life he's been a runner, but in this episode and in this certain moment of his life, he decided that he's going to stop running away from, life's challenges or hardships, and he decides that he's going to stand up for himself, and the big shootout at the end is his way of proving that. And then we also have a really good scene between Dwight and Charles, because the last episode, Charles wanted to meet Dwight in Tulsa to discuss business or to just let go of their beef. But obviously, we all know that was a huge lie. And Charles does come to Tulsa, but not by himself. He brings his other guys with him. And obviously, Dwight is not a stupid person, so he brought his guys as well. And the guys, at least one of Charles's guys, ends up joining Dwight's crew, which I think the guy's name was Goody, and then Charles and the other guy are being cornered by the guys that Dwight was able to get in a deal that he was able to make last episode. And those guys, by the way, end up bringing Charles to the airport, although we never actually see a scene of them bringing Charles to the airport, so I'm not saying anything happened, but anything's possible. Another thing that happens in this episode, and probably my favorite part of this entire episode, is that Dwight gives an inspiring message to all of his crew members before they end up going into this big shootout, and it was amazing. And I don't know what the chances are of Sylvester Stallone getting an Emmy nomination and let alone winning, but I think with that scene, and if you've seen the scene and you know what I'm talking about, then I think he's got a pretty good chance. Another thing that happens in this episode is probably the moment that started the war, or at least started the shootout that we see in this episode, is that Bodhi ends up hacking into Waltrip's computer, and before he does that, he gives a little, scene about how he does it, and honestly, like Dwight said, it did not feel like he was speaking English at all, but he is able to hack into Waltrip's computer, and that set him off, and that's when, the shootout was about to take place. Another thing that happens in this episode is obviously the shootout itself, and I'm just going to be honest with you, it was kind of underwhelming because Waltrip's guys ended up getting absolutely destroyed in the matter of minutes. It didn't even feel like they had a chance, even though they had all these shotguns and all types of guns, but damn did they get handled quickly, and honestly, kind of anticlimactic if you ask me. And obviously, we got to see Waltrip die, which I guess was kind of a good thing because he's been menacing all season. And by the way, if you've seen the way that Dwight absolutely like slams Waltrip's head into that like certain thing, I don't know what it's called, that was a brutal scene. But aside from that, the overall shootout was kind of mediocre. And I'm only saying that because it feels like they've been hyping up this war for the past couple of weeks, and for that to be the final shootout or the final action scene that we get this season, it just didn't feel right to me. The last thing I'm going to talk about in this episode is that we get a 3-month time jump in this episode, and it turns out life's going pretty great for everyone. Dwight and Mitch are able to open up their bar or club or whatever, and then Dwight ends up getting Tina and her family to come to Tulsa, and even Tyson's got a girlfriend all of a sudden. We don't get her name. And Mitch ends up singing, and first of all, I didn't even know the guy could sing. Maybe I just missed that from the other episodes, but he's actually a really good singer, so credit to the actor who plays him. And the biggest thing that happens this episode is that Dwight ends up getting sent to prison again, and this time it's not for killing someone, it's actually for the money that he got Bodhi to send Stacy, and then Stacy ends up using the money against Dwight. And that's simply because Stacy just wanted to keep her career, and we all know how much she loves her job and that she will do anything to keep that job. And by the way, it must suck for Amy to have her dad go to prison again, or probably go to prison again, and now her sons are gonna have to deal with the same stuff that she had to deal with when she was a child. And overall, guys, this Tulsa King season has been amazing. I'm going to go ahead and give it an 8.5 out of 10. And I just want to say thank you to everyone that's been watching these Tulsa King videos, because clearly you guys are liking it as much as I am. And you guys like watching the videos, and I like making the videos for you. So, with that being said, what did you guys think of Tulsa King as an overall season? Did you like it as much as I did? Did you not like it at all? Let me know in the comments. And those are my thoughts on that.